Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, September 26th, and I have to apologize, I think. Well, apologize, explain, whatever. I know I haven't been making a lot of videos lately. That's for several reasons, and I kind of wanted to address those today and do a little walking around and talking here on the farm. It's not going to be a lot of action in today's video, but it will be a bit of an explanation as to why I've been absent on YouTube. As you can see, I got the Farm LM behind me, so first things first, I'll show you what our little project is that we're working on today and explain that, and then we'll go on to the rest of it. So here's my project for today. This is a 6-inch, 16-foot transfer auger. And then there's a part of a 3-point hitch arm assembly from our 686 hanging over there. So I picked this auger up for a very reasonable price on Craigslist, and it's part of my grand master plan for this winter, which is, you may remember from previous videos, I fixed up our old Hero fanning mill and used that to clean and bag corn for wildlife feed. And then I marketed that through Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and a few other methods online, and it went way better than I thought last fall. And so the way that I was doing it last fall was I was pretty much parking the gravity box right here, and I was hauling all the corn into the shed in buckets. And that is no fun to fill up that fanning mill using, well, 6 or 7 gallon buckets basically. So I wanted to come up with some kind of a system that would save me some labor. And I figured if I got a transfer auger, I was looking for a 4-inch transfer auger. I managed to find this 6-inch one. It's a little bigger than what I need, but it'll serve its purposes just fine. This was just my project for today, was to get this auger sanded down and painted up. It was in pretty good shape before, but I had some Farmall red paint, and I had the paint guns, which are always a temptation to use. And so Dad and I came out and gave it a quick sanding, just to knock any loose paint and any excessive rust off of it, and came out with the paint guns and hit it quick. And don't tell Dad I got a little on the M just for fun. Anyway, on to other things. So my explanation for why I haven't been making a lot of videos lately. We have been really busy this summer, and as with, I'm sure, many of you, COVID has thrown some wrenches into our normal lives. So I guess we're either temporarily not living normal lives, or this is going to be the new normal. I'm not sure which yet. But I have been staying at home and doing homeschooling, or not homeschooling technically, but a virtual academy. So our local school district offers us the option to do classes online and not have to attend in person in the building. And since my wife arguably has the better career in terms of pay anyway, she's going to work every day. We're fortunate enough that with just her working, we can get by fine and pay our bills okay and not have to worry. So since I'm self-employed with construction work and with farming to some extent, I've decided to just take some time, and I've been telling any customers that call for construction work that I'm temporarily indisposed, and I am basically staying home with our daughter and doing schooling 4 days a week. And my wife worked her schedule out that she has Wednesdays off, so one day during the week I can come out to the farm, or I can do other projects. I've been painting our house in town and doing repairs on that and trying to squeeze in one last bit of progress on that before we get too late in the season to be doing that sort of stuff. So, you know, I mean, it's just basically too many irons in the fire, which has always been a problem for me. And I'd love to be out on the farm more, but I'm just kind of taking this opportunity to punch out some stuff, and so that's not left me a lot of time. And I've had a hard time editing my videos too. I'm taking plenty of footage, but being able to sit down at the computer and actually crank out an edited video takes a good amount of time. And, you know, it gets late in the evening, and if I don't want to be dead on my feet the next day, I'm not going to stay up late doing that. So just finding time to put those videos together. I'm really hoping I can bank a little bit of that time and get caught up before harvest season, so that you've got videos showing all the things we did over the summer before we get into the harvest stuff. I don't want to get out of order, but I'm not really sure why I don't want to get out of order, because really you can do it in any order you want, right? But it would be kind of nice to progress through the year in a linear way. So that's that story. So I've just got a lot going on, but I thought today we would just do a quick walk around the farm, The nice thing about being on a small farm, everything is in walking distance. So we're gonna look through the crops. This will be my last crop update for the growing season, and videos after this are gonna be harvest season, because harvest season is coming up on us really quick. Let's go take a look at the crops quick. I think we'll look at the corn first. So this is our big 18-acre cornfield. You can see all the green that's in there is ragweed. So we do still have a continuing weed problem. But I want to show you, this field's getting better in terms of weeds. And I would have to say, in general on the farm, we had just an awful weed problem last year, especially ragweed. I think I see a little more water hemp on the farm this year, but the ragweed in general is less. And it seems to be the worst on the headlands in the corn where things are compacted. And actually, if I swing around, take a few steps here. Well, I guess you can't see it, but on this end of the field, this end of the field is always heavily compacted too, because we have a lot of traffic that we go up and down this field when we're hauling loads from fields further away on the farm. So that tends to be a zone where the ragweed is dominating too, but it's in general, just in general, better this year, even though we used less herbicide, and I credit some of that to the no-till and the cover crops. Let's go walk down the rows and I'll show you the cover crops that are interseeded into the corn. So I'm in the headland area right now, and you can see there's some giant ragweed, and we've got water hemp, we've got some velvet leaf in here. It's just a tangled mess, and really not too pleasing, but we'll just take a couple of steps and turn. So we're going counter to the headlands now, across the headlands and down, and all of a sudden you hit the main part of the field here, and we've got this great interseeded cover crop. Now, it's not to say there's no weeds in here, there are, but it's being really dominated by cover crop. And especially now, you see the leaves are drying down on the corn, and the canopy is opening up and letting the sunlight in more. So you can really see the annual ryegrass has shot up just in the last few days. We got a really nice rain here the other day, and that really seems to have set that annual ryegrass off. We've got some kale here growing right in front of me. Do I see any radish? No, I don't see any radish. Oh wait, there's one right at my feet. Right here, there's a radish. And you can see a little crimson clover that was interseeded. Clover's not quite as heavy, but it's in here and there. And then of course the annual ryegrass, and that's everything in the mix. And it's really interesting as you walk along how the cover crops will dominate different species in different areas. You know, we put in this 4-way interseeded mix, and so this is kind of a hilltop. There's a lot of clay here, and I'm seeing a lot of annual ryegrass, and then everything else is a little bit smaller. But if you get into a lower area, all of a sudden you'll see the crimson clover really come through, maybe where it's a little bit wetter. And where there's more sunlight, all of a sudden you'll find a big kale plant. So it's really, really cool to see the cover crop program working and getting these interseeded. So now when we harvest this corn, we'll be harvesting earlier than typical this year. It's the exact opposite of last year when we harvested much later than normal. So we'll be able to come in here, take this out. It'll really open the sunlight up to come through here, because we'll be knocking down the canopy of the corn crop. And this cover crop should have time to flourish yet this fall and actually really put on some growth. And in turn, you know, it's going to hold the soil and produce root exudates. And since we're not tilling, we don't have to worry about erosion. You know, especially as we're taking these crops off early this year, if we wanted to get in and plow right away, it's not out of the ordinary to have a heavy fall rain. And so to not have to worry about any kind of erosion after plowing, which is what we normally would have done in corn stalks like this. There's so many benefits to the program. I can't cover it all in one little brief video, but I want to point out too, the corn yield is going to be excellent. We'll walk down and look at, but we upped our plant population from about 24,000 plants per acre, which is what we were always planting on these wide rows, to 29,000. So the plants are close together, sometimes really close together. Our old John Deere 7000 doesn't do a perfect job at metering out the seed. It's pretty good, but you see how close those plants are to each other. So on wide rows like that, getting a high plant population means you're going to have more plants close together in the row. But side dressing like we did with fertilizer, using the corn planter and putting that fertilizer right next to the corn plant. For the kind of year we had, it's been such an ideal growing year that we seem to have administered just the right amount of fertilizer to get a pretty good crop. There's some plants that are spindly and have small ears, you know, but a lot of them, you just turn to the side here and right next to it, you know, we've got some nice sized ears of corn that are really looking good. So our old corn picker, I'm pretty sure this corn is just gonna come pouring out of that machine. I hope it can keep up. Yeah, I just love looking at that cover crop, so sorry, I'm gonna inundate you with images of that. So I'm gonna keep walking down to the end of this field, and then I'll cut through the meadow over to a bean field and we'll take a look at a soybean field. All right, I had to stop. I got into a little bit lower area of the field where the ground is really rich. Still really nice. Cover crop, little more water hemp in here. But the cover crop's visible and coming through. But then, you know, when you get into some of these low areas, this 18-acre field has some of the richest ground on our farm. And I mean, there's just some monster ears of corn in here. And you can find these in certain parts of the field, just one after another. So we're looking at a very good yield this year. And any farmer gets excited about that, right? And of course, I would be remiss as a regenerative farmer. I think I can officially call myself that now, since we're doing these practices. I would be remiss in saying that yield is everything, because we know it's not. If you put a lot of inputs in, a lot of fertilizer, a lot of spray, and then you don't get a return off of that, you know, it's dollars per acre that really matter. And we're trying to do this in a way that's also environmentally friendly. You know, we're trying to rejuvenate our soils and get our microbial activity really fired up on this farm, and try to build a good web of life in our soil so that we need fewer inputs over time and can actually have a better dollar per acre return on this farm. This is a small farm, so we need to be profitable. So I'm very heartened to see that looks like it's going to be the case this year, because we did minimize our inputs. We tried to keep our spraying to a minimum. There were times when we looked and said, maybe we should make another spray pass. There's a lot of weeds coming up. We can see that. It's not too late. Let's maybe get in there. And then we hemmed and hawed around about it a little bit and said, you know what? We don't know what the commodity prices are doing. The markets aren't looking that hot. At least they weren't in the middle of summer. They're still not. They're a little better. But, you know, we just said, you know, if it's a dollars per acre issue, why don't we just let it go? Why don't we just minimize that, that expense and just see what happens? Because that might make the difference between being profitable and making money and losing money. So I think we made the right call, because at least our corn yield's looking very, very good, and it didn't take us a ton of money to get to that point. All right, I'm at the edge of one of our soybean fields, and you can see there's quite a bit of weeds in here. But as I've said in some of my other videos, this is not necessarily a bad thing. I have found the weed pressure to be really acceptable this year. And I think probably we'll venture in there and take a little bit closer look, and I'll kind of try to describe to you what I'm talking about. So there are parts of this field where the beans are almost waist high on me. That's the tops of these plants here. And they have got pods on them, top to bottom. And we didn't apply any fertilizer to these beans, and we only did one spray pass. So again, now we're talking about profitability, right? Dollars per acre. That's what we're focusing on with these beans. And I would have loved to have seen these beans completely weed-free this year. You know, if we planted these E3 beans with the idea that we could use a nice cocktail mix of herbicides and get some of these annual weed problems, the ragweed in particular, under control. But again, not knowing what the markets were going to do, we had to spray a little bit earlier, partly because we were terminating cover crops. And this second flush of ragweed came in, or third, depending on how you look at it. And so we do have ragweed, and we do have some native grasses coming up in here. But it's nothing that the combine can't handle. And the difference between this year and last year is last year, in some of our bean fields, we had ragweed so thick there were no beans in between the ragweed plants. I was going through huge swaths of that 18-acre field, which was in beans last year, And there were no beans going through the combine. It was just thrashing and smashing and planting a fresh ragweed crop, because that's all that was going through that machine. So it's going to be a big night and day difference between last year and this year, in that there's ragweed in these beans, but there's a lot of beans here too, and the price is better than it was last year so far. It's got to hang on a couple more weeks, and since we don't have storage, when we harvest our beans, they come out of the field, they go into the gravity boxes, they go on a truck, and they go to the elevator. So we have to take whatever price we get at the time of harvest, because that's how our farm is set up. If we had more infrastructure, we could play the markets a little more, but we don't. So we have to take whatever we get at the time that we're harvesting. So I guess my point is that if I'm trying to make a choice between weed-free fields and a higher profit margin, I'm going to take the higher profit margin. And from a regenerative standpoint, the idea that I didn't make more than one spray pass on these fields is really good too. So there we go. Profit margin, better choices, ecologically speaking. It's the whole bag, right? So I made my way up to a hilltop here, and we can kind of look down on the field. And you can see that all of it has some weed pressure in it. But you can also observe the bean crop here, which is over knee high on me, and looking really good as far as pods on the plants. Still drying down clearly, so it's going to be a little while before we get in here. We're looking at a newly seeded alfalfa field. So you can see the little alfalfa sprouts. There's some teff grass here. We disked this field lightly so that some of the teff grass clumps are still living on. They'll die as soon as we have a good frost. But a lot of little alfalfa sprouts getting established here. And this is really exciting to me, because this will be our new alfalfa field. This alfalfa field over here, as of right now, we're planning to take it out of production this year. We're going to spray it down this fall. We're hoping to get one more cutting off of it. It'll be a late cutting, be a little bit of a challenge to get it dried and baled with the shorter days and dewy nights, but we're going to try to get that one last crop off of it, and then we will burn it down with spray and let it overwinter and no-till corn into it next year. And it should give us a nice corn crop with very little need for fertilizer. So again, profit margin. Always profit margin, always good ecological choices. When those two things meet, that's when you know you're doing a good job, in my mind. And as I'm walking along this alfalfa field, behind me is the soybean field I was just in, and that has a lot of weed problems, but that is actually a candidate for a hay field next year. Because if we put things into a hay rotation, they get cut 3 times a summer, annual weeds can't seed out, it breaks the weed cycle, and we should be able to give that field kind of a reset then for row crops. So if we put that into hay for a couple of years, that would probably be our next field to go into alfalfa or teff. Jury's still out on teff. We're trying to make decisions about whether we're going to keep doing it or not. It definitely has its good and its bad points, but that's probably a topic for another video. Along those same lines, if we didn't plant teff next year in that field, we may consider growing some oats. And that would be, I mean, I know I've been using the word exciting in this video a lot, but to me that would be very exciting, because we haven't grown oats on this farm since I was a kid. And it's a crop that I've wanted to put into production here for a couple of years. And that has its drawbacks too. We're not really set up to grow oats. We can get them planted, but getting them cut and stored would be the issue. We don't have a swatter, we don't have a pickup head for the combine. We'd have to direct cut them. And if you direct cut them, you almost have to dry them. We don't have a dryer, so you can see we're short on some key critical infrastructure for that process. But I think there'd be a market for it, and there would definitely be a market for the straw. So that's a possibility, would be to plant oats in that field next year. Take the oat harvest in late July, and then work it just a little bit and direct seed it to alfalfa, kind of like the field I'm in right now, where we direct seeded that to alfalfa after the teff grass was done. So that's a prospect of an alternative that we could do. And again, good for soil health, breaks the weed cycle, gives some diversity of crop rotation, right? And possible opportunity for either alfalfa or cover crops after it. Just a lot of benefits there, and I think something that we can really consider. One final note that I will say is that these soybean fields that we looked at are not the best fields. The best field on the farm, as far as soybeans go, is the one by our driveway, And that's the one that we planted green into cereal rye. It was intended to go into corn this year, and we changed our minds at the last minute. And that's the nicest looking bean field on the farm. It had the lowest weed pressure, it has the best looking bean yield, and I attribute at least some of that to the fact that we planted that field green and we let that cereal rye grow, and it crowded out the weeds for a large portion of the summer. And then once we sprayed that down, it had that extra residue. The beans just really seemed to love growing with the cereal rye. And so from that lesson, I am definitely going to get cereal rye seed for all of our corn acreage. So after we harvest corn, I want to go in with the no-till drill right behind the corn harvest and seed in at least 60 pounds of cereal rye to all the corn stalk ground. And then next year, we'll be able to plant all our beans green into cereal rye. And I know a lot of farmers are doing that. That's become kind of almost a no-brainer in the regenerative farming world, is planting soybeans green into cereal rye. So I think it's time we got on board, and that's my intention. I hope that the fall cooperates well enough that I can get in there and get all that done. I'm going to take you to the field by the driveway and just show you the example that I'm talking about with those beans looking really nice. Okay, so this is the driveway field. It's only a 6-acre field, so you can see almost all of it from any given part that you're standing in. So some weed pressure, but generally much cleaner than the other bean fields. This is lighter ground for the most part. So the beans are not quite as tall. You can see that they're shorter. A lot of pods though. Pretty clean. I'm gonna walk a little bit more, take a little video from a different perspective. This part of the field looks particularly good. Now, we had the drill calibrated incorrectly when we planted this area. This is where we started planting beans this spring. And we were aiming for 145,000 plants per acre. I'm pretty sure we got closer to like 170,000 plants per acre in this area. I somehow managed to pick the 2 seed cups on the drill that were running lighter than than the others. So when I tried to calibrate to the right setting, all the other cups were flowing a lot more heavy, and a lot more bean seed came out. So this is just dense with beans, which isn't a bad thing. We had a good growing year, so they were able to not really have to compete too hard with each other. You can see there's a weed patch right there. Low spot in the field. There's actually a drain that goes under the road right there, culvert. That's a weedy spot most years, so I don't put too much stock in that, but the rest of the field just looks really clean. And again, 1 spray pass early in the season. And I credit a lot of that to planting this green into that cereal rye. So I am looking forward to doing that again next year. I really think that it's the way of the future, at least on this farm. And you get no break that way in having something growing in the field at all times, because that cereal rye starts to come up pretty much when the snow melts, and you got living roots in the soil all year long. And if we throw a cover crop in right after these beans, you have virtually no break in having something living growing in a field like this. So I'm just really pleased with this, and I'm really proud to be showing it to everyone today. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys today. Our next video, the next thing I record, is probably going to either be prep for harvest or actual harvest. I know last year I had a number of harvest prep videos. I did a little something for soybean harvest where I was getting that combine ready to go. And I did a little something before corn harvest where I was getting the corn picker ready to go. One of the nice things, I think, is that we had just bought that combine last year, so there was a lot of work to do on it, and I had to go through the whole machine to really suss out the good and bad points of it and fix issues. So a new cap and rotor, new points and condenser, grease everything, and it should be ready to go because we've done all the work already on the front end. So same with the corn picker. We did a bunch of work on it last year. It should be pretty well tuned up. So I don't know that there's going to be a ton of prep work to do. We should just be able to sort of coast into harvest this year, and that's a good feeling. That's what our next step is. So it's probably going to be a couple of weeks, and then I'll see you again for the big show.